introduce our special guest today. So with us, we have Céline Leboeuf. She's an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy at Florida International University. Her academic research lies at the intersection of feminist philosophy, the philosophy of race, and 20th century French and German philosophy. She has published on beauty, trends such as the thigh gap obsession, the experience of mixed race individuals, and the pioneering feminist and author Simone de Beauvoir. Her essays for a general audience have appeared in Medium, Site, and other venues. Thank you, Céline, for joining us. And we also have Tyler Shores. Tyler is a manager of the ThinkLab at the University of Cambridge in the UK and is a senior research associate at the Intellectual Forum Jesus College. His research focuses on digital habits, social media, and how digital environments shape how we work, think, and learn. Prior to Cambridge, Tyler worked at Stanford in nonprofit education and also worked at Google, where he was running the Authors at Google program. His various work has been featured in the New York Times, BBC, Wired, and other places. And he was once on an episode of The Simpsons, which I'd love to hear more about that. And without further ado, I want to now dive into our conversation that we have for today because I'm really excited about what we're about to share. So Céline and Tyler, you've both been collaborating with the nonprofit Shut Up and Write for some time now. And you're here today because of this great global writing community. So Céline, you've been an active organizer on Meetup for the online chapter. And so for folks joining us today who aren't familiar with the organization, can you tell us more about it?
Yes, thank you. I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to speak about Shut Up and Write today. I've been attending Shut Up and Write events since 2012 in person in San Francisco Bay Area and New York. And since 2022, I've been a host for an online chapter of Shut Up and Write. So what is Shut Up and Write? As its name indicates, it's about meeting together to write in silence. I'll tell you a little bit more about the format, but just to give you a sense of where we're coming from, Shut Up and Write is a nonprofit organization that offers, that hosts meetings either online or in person for people to get together and to write together. This started in 2007 with Rennie Saunders, who started the first Shut Up and Write in San Francisco at Crossroads Cafe. He was leveraging the accountability of others and a writing routine by meeting with other writers to go ahead and accomplish his writing goals. Fast forward to 2024, Shut Up and Write on Meetup has over 422 chapters across 62 countries and nearly 130,000 Shut Up and Writers or writers meeting to write together. So the format is pretty simple. We just meet together either online or in person. And what we accomplish is to set out intentions for our writing session. Let's say you want to write a paragraph, 400 words, what have you. You set an intention, announce it to the other writers who are with you on that day, and then write during a fixed amount of time, whether it's an hour or 90 minutes. And then at the end, writers reconvene and say whether they stayed on task. Did they write those 400 words, or did they get distracted by email? Whatever they did, they hold themselves accountable to the group. Shut Up and Write is so important for writers because many of us talk about writing, I'm going to write the next great novel, or we get caught up in other duties. Let's say we have paid work, a job, caretaking duties, and we let some of those things get in the way of forming a regular writing routine. So Shut Up and Write, by having these regular meetings and holding ourselves accountable to others, is really a valuable tool for accomplishing writing goals.
And from a personal experience, I've been supporting the community for many years from the Meetup perspective, and it's been incredible to see all the work and the growth in the past years. And now the Shut Up and Write method is even used in various college and universities where professors and students host those Shut Up and Write events to help make progress on research and dissertation writing. And the methods at this point is also the subject of research in academic circles. So, and that's where, Tyler, you've been more involved. So love to hear a bit more about your experience collaborating with the organization.
Sure, happy to. I guess let me start a little bit too, and start where our Shut Up and Write story has begun. And our introduction was thanks to a friend and colleague of ours, Professor Inge Muber, who's also called the Thesis Whisperer online, and she teaches at Australia National University. And this came about simply from a workshop that she and I ran together during last summer. And this really jumped out at me. This, she was telling us, she wrote a blog post about this, but then we did some of it in action in terms of writing together in a group. And it appealed on a couple of levels. First on the, it jumped out at me in terms of like, well, I like writing. I like telling myself and other people to shut up. How can we do more of this sort of thing? Specifically, the distinctive thing that I remember that kind of is still very vivid to me is that sound of everyone typing together, a room full of people, type, 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 type. And then it was, I was like, well, this is nice. This is actually better than sitting in a dusty old library by ourselves doing these sort of things. So how do we do more of that? So that's essentially what we've been trying to do, like trying to find, and we're still figuring it out. So like this is kind of us in terms of like figuring out how these things go from the, it's different everywhere, of course. Every institution, organization is different. At Cambridge, there is no writing center. There is no like one place that can say like, it's like, oh, we do a lot of writing things. We're a university. So writing is there with different groups, different communities, and all these things. But it's never just, it's just sort of a thing that is kind of, always running in the background. But we rarely do a lot. And like Céline was just saying, is like the making time for this thing. It's kind of funny. It's the whole like, yes, we have to like, write, research, publish, and all of these things. But I was like, but we need time to do those things too, and like the support that goes with it. So that's what we've been doing a little bit. Here, let me share a couple of rapid fire things we've got going on here. So our approach has been, hopefully everyone can see this. Someone let me know if it's not visible, but we've been trying to try different locations. So different colleges across Cambridge, different locations to start doing Shut Up and Write. So it's been a little bit of a, I don't know, like a Johnny Appleseed kind of planting seeds in different areas and seeing where Shut Up and Write communities might sprout. It was kind of that was, and it really makes sense. Oh, well, edit that out. That was kind of dumb. But the idea is, let's see if we can kind of do this and see like basically, like where it'll take hold, and very open in terms of like, basically the main criteria is, do you have something writing, or I call it writing adjacent work, because writing is very expansive. So sometimes writing means, researching, looking at a couple of papers, making edits, working on an outline, checking references. So that's the general rule, and that's pretty much it in terms of just like how we do that across different things. And we're starting to collect information. We're at the very beginning stages of, we're all researchers in ThinkLab and across Cambridge who are doing this. So like, what works? Like, what are people's motivations that do this? What brings them to this? And we're starting to collect information because we would like to know, we're excited by these things. How do we do this? And how do we do this better? How do we figure out what works? So getting a glimpse into people's understanding, where are they in the writing process? Everything from, oh my God, I have to finish a PhD dissertation in the next month, to I'm thinking about writing, but that's as far as I've gotten. So that is one of the main things. I guess Céline also mentioned this too, but the little cartoon from Grant Snyder here really talks about this. I say this every time to everyone. The hardest part of writing is scroll, cat, scroll, wind, scroll, bird, scroll. There she is. So the hardest part is the showing up part, right? So that's the kind of thing. And it's true. It's totally true. I should be writing right now. Like if only I had more time to do this. So shut up and write, and bringing some of that gentle, positive social pressure in terms of, I have said, I'm going to be here with these people at this place at this time, has been kind of like a revelation for a lot of us. And I say this as a convert too, as someone who used to do only solitary writing. Is like, oh, I write best on my own. I kind of prefer to just like be on, like kind of a solitary place. My thinking changed around that somewhere around March or April 2020, if I had to estimate, in terms of like, it's nice to be in social groups and have this sense of community and all of that that goes with it. So, anyways, hopefully that wasn't too long of an answer, but that's where we've been and what we're doing right now.
Absolutely, and thank you so much. And really, the goal, is writers have to be so accountable in forming those new habits. So, it's really interesting to get those learnings and also to apply them across everything. So, we're talking about writing, but obviously the frameworks that we're going to talk more about can be applied in multiple things, in work, and like any other hobbies as well in life. And this time right now is actually a really good timing to have this conversation, because we all know that at this point in the year, so many people have already abandoned some of the intentions that they have set for the year. To become better at XYZ. We all do this at the beginning of the year. It's such a common thing to do. But somehow around this time of the year, about 2 months later, so many people struggle with sticking to those new habits. So, Tyler, based on research that you've done, what's the common struggle? Like, why do we struggle so much to stick to new positive habits?
Well, I mean, so we're in February, right? So I thought now is a good time to talk about New Year's resolutions and these sort of things. So everyone's heard maybe a variation of this, that most New Year's resolutions don't pan out. People don't stick to it. So I just grabbed a random one from this year. And one of the popular numbers that I saw a couple times is 80% of New Year's resolutions fail by February. It's sometime during February. I was like, oh, okay. At this point, I'm going to do the very academic thing and say, what do we mean by fail? So like some studies actually show, and I am going to answer this question, I'm just doing this in a very somewhat roundabout way, is that some studies have shown, for example, that when they survey a couple thousand people about this, about New Year's resolutions and habits, it turns out about half or 2/3 of those people accomplish something with their New Year's resolutions. So in terms of, so specifically to your question, it's a little bit of that all or nothing mindset in terms of, it's like, all right, so you had a degree of success, and I was like, I wanted to write a novel, an 80,000 word novel or whatever it was. That's my New Year's resolution. I was like, oh, all right, so I fell short, but I wrote 30,000 or 40,000 words. That's still a hell of a lot better than 0 words. So like, by the strict criteria of just like, was this a success or a failure sort of thing? It's like, we need to give ourselves a little bit of a break when it comes to some of these habit things. So I guess understanding that, like, so specifically asking and thinking about why some of these habits fall short. There's a number of things. Like the common causes are too big, too many habits at the same time. So it's like, I want to, fresh year, fresh me, and all of these things. I want to lose weight, go running, balance my checkbook, do all of these things. That's way too many things. We have to like remember in terms of like start small. So I'll talk about this more in a little bit, but like starting small, and the simple summary of what I'm saying is like, how do we make it easier to do the things that we want to do already? And that comes down to like removing some of the barriers for doing those things. So let's say I use an example. So my New Year's habit was drinking more water instead of coffee and soda during the year. I'm still going. It's February. I consider this a success, but a simple way to do it is just like always have the water bottle with me. That makes it a lot easier to keep drinking more water during the day. So anyways, talk about that more in a little bit, but thinking about that, getting out of that, like, it's like, oops, I missed a time. You know, it's hard to get back on track with these sort of habits. Like, you know, we need to give ourselves a little bit of a break. Like in terms of like, if you look bigger picture over the, let's say 8 weeks, if you've been starting on a New Year's resolution, steps forward are still steps forward. Even if there's an occasional step back, 3 steps forward and 2 steps back is still pretty good progress. So that's the short answer.
I love that. And I'm definitely the one of those type of people that want to transform, do a big transformation all that at once. So I love this idea of, you know, be kind to ourselves and celebrate the wins rather than just focusing on the, you know,
Exactly.
the failure. um, awesome. And so unless, you know, Céline, I don't know if you have some examples you want to share, or we can also just dive into more the content here.
Yeah, I'd be happy to add something to what Tyler said. So I think what you see when you see success in the Shut Up and Write groups, it's because people, you know, commit to coming regularly and have short and specific goals for the writing sessions that we hold together. If you come saying, I'm going to write a novel, that's really huge and sometimes vague to do. But if you set an intention in January, let's say you're going to show up to 2 Shut Up and Write meetings per week for an hour at a time in order to write the outline for your novel. And by like January, end of January, you're going to reset your goals, see what progress you made, and establish small intentions for February. That's where you're going to see people making progress towards their writing goals. So I agree with Tyler, sometimes too ambitious or too vague, that's where people struggle when they're trying to get the writing done, get their novel or whatever they're working on finished.
Absolutely. So let's dive into some frameworks that research was able to prove to be successful in building and keeping new habits. So let's all look at this to get some tips and cues here on how we can do this better.
And that's my turn to talk, right?
That's your, sorry, I didn't cue
Okay.
you, but that's you, Tyler.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of different prevailing theories. I will share one of my favorites right now, which is one way to think about habits is basically breaking them down into 3 components. So first we have the cue. For example, a cue might be a notification on your phone. Second is the action, which in this case might be check your phone or not check your phone. Inaction is still an action. Third might be the dopamine hit, which is another way of just sort of saying like, you know, ooh, the likes or the little bit of something that we get, the little bit of novelty that we get from checking these sort of things. So cue, action, reward is one way to think about it. Another popular one for people that are interested in this topic. So I love BJ Fogg's book. BJ is a professor at Stanford. And he's here. This is the one of the ways to summarize it in terms of think about behavior habits in this case. B equals MAP. So MAP is behavior, habit in this case is your motivation. So the reason, and this comes from a number of different things, hopes or fears, things that you want to accomplish, times your ability, you know, like how easy or hard is it to do it? So my water example, for example, making it easier to drink water, in this case, having the water bottle and a source of water makes it easier. And then prompt, whatever the prompt is. So my little secret is I found a water drinking app on my watch. So it'll actually remind me every so often to drink water. Otherwise, I would forget. I don't know what it's like for normal people, but I don't often feel thirsty. So I need to be reminded to drink water. So even knowing that, that's part of it too, is figuring out where your like relative sense of awareness and strengths and weaknesses are, and then building things up, kind of like orchestrating your environment around some of these things to make it easier for you. I saw, and then related to that, I want to pick up one of the things that I saw in the questions, thank you for the questions, we'll get to those soon, but I saw Richard had a question in particular about the showing up thing, and a question of for a writing habit or something, anything that's, habit or work related. One of the things that we do in our Shut Up and Write groups is this idea. So it's called a number of things, but it's called, most commonly, this is Parkinson's law. We take advantage of this fact that, okay, we have our time that we've committed, like Céline and I have talked about, in terms of like, we're going to meet and work on something writing during this time. Like, it's not finding time, it's making time to work on the writing stuff that we know is important. And we're going to do this as a group. Figuring out time to do this. This speaks to me. Your mileage might vary based on your own personal experiences, but work oftentimes, and this is also to the idea of, everyone knows this feeling in terms of whether it's school or work and all of that. It's like, why is it sometimes easier to get motivated when there's a deadline, in terms of like the thing that I had all month to work on or all weekend to work on? Now it's an hour or two before the thing. Magically, I'm able to do that. That is one way to do it. It's a little stressful sometimes, but like, how do we take that phenomenon, the looming deadline thing, and figure out like, okay, we're constraining our amount of time to do this, rather than saying, it's Wednesday, I have all day to do this thing. It's like, no, you don't. You really don't, because you have like normal business going on with life and other responsibilities, whatever your role, job is to other people, responsibilities and things. Realistically, I have 2 hours to do this. So that's kind of what we try to do in our Shut Up and Write groups, is kind of like set small sort of like writing sprints, we call them, in terms of like, all right, let's have a warm up. Again, similar to what Céline talks about, especially because I research a lot of digital habits and distraction stuff. So for example, it might be something, if we're running one right now. All right, so everyone's talked about one of the things that they want to work on during this thing. So let's prioritize that. Strongly encourage everyone to keep your email closed, keep your digital device, if possible, like out of hands reach, ideally not screen side up, because even that, the research has shown, even the temptation, the possibility that you might get notified is enough to be distracting in itself. So some of these things we're changing, we're making little nudges to our environment to see how we can kind of like stay as focused as possible on some of these things. And then taking advantage of the fact that it's like, all right, we're going to set this amount of time, 30 minutes to say, and specific helps for these things, rather than I'm working on my book, I'm working on my novel, or whatever it is. Could we narrow down a little bit? As like, I'm going to work on this chapter, I'm going to work on these couple of paragraphs, or this like character study sort of thing. That tends to help us a lot too, to have very specific, actionable next steps. I feel like I over answered that question. I kind of forgot what the question was. Sorry. Can someone remind me?
No, that's all great. We're kind of going over those different frameworks. So we've covered the B equal map, and I don't know if there was any other charts or additional frameworks you wanted to share at this point.
The one other one I wanted to share was, so this one more example, and then I'm not trying to make this too sciencey. Sorry, everyone, but like I like having the visual examples for these sort of things. So one other way to think about this is, excuse me, I've got the, too many windows open right now. 1 second. Equal
No worries.
EP. All right, here we go. So, all right, one quick thing, and then last one from me. So this is another one, again, from BJ Fogg's work. I'm a big fan of the stuff that he's been working on this for a while, like, a couple of decades now. So this graph that you see on the right-hand side, basically, to summarize all of this, so B equals MAP, so this is behavior equals motivation times prompt times ability. The point of showing you the graph is like, how do we control any of those elements in the equation to get above that green line, the action line? So for example, my motivation is low right now. It's tired and it's dark. I don't want to go and do writing or something like that. What could be the prompt in this case, in terms of like, oh, I said I was going to go to this thing, and Celine's going to be disappointed if I I don't show up and I'm not accountable for that. Like, that helps me a little bit. That nudges me along. How hard is it? We're doing this online actually, so not that hard in terms of like, showing up for the meeting sort of thing. So what are the different elements that we can kind of like, nudge for our habits, depending on what they are, to make this easier for us? So that's the very, very short version of the habit model. And it's one that I like. It's one of those things that I think is very helpful. Like it's like when you start looking at it, and the book that I'm referring to, BJ Fogg's book, is called Tiny Habits, is all about that. So what I started off saying in terms of like, how do we make it as small as possible, like super small, so like embarrassingly small to start, in terms of like, I need to work on the novel, or I have to write this PhD thing, it's this many words, that's scary and kind of overwhelming. And I was like, okay, so BJ Fogg's model would say, what's the simplest thing that we could possibly do, like ridiculously simple? I wrote or like I wrote half a sentence. Good, that's progress. And then we celebrate these things. And then we start to basically program our brains to be this whole model in terms of, remember, cue, response, action, reward sort of thing. It's as simple as that, in terms of like, oh, I wrote the thing, I feel good. My reward is either something intrinsic or extrinsic to us that we do this. And then we keep doing this. This is essentially how social media works for all, but that's a whole separate topic, but essentially the same sort of thing. And it's like, why do we are tied to our devices and do these things so often? Same sort of thing distills into this. And we can use that same model the way that we're doing this. So that's the nice thing about habits. I've mostly talked about positive habits in this case, but it can also be a way to kind of, help us reduce like what we consider bad habits. I don't even like saying bad habits, because I try to take a little bit more of the like the kinder, gentler approach, because we beat ourselves up too much in terms of this. I hear tons of people saying, it's like, I have this horrible habit, or I have this bad habit, I'm so bad about this. And I was like, I mean, you really could just say like, it's not the right habit for you at this place in time. Maybe it's even something that you enjoy doing, but it's a sequencing error. So it's just something that you could do before or after something that you need to get done. Anyways, that's enough out of me in terms of like some of those things. So things to think about. And if it is recorded, I'm happy to share some links in case you want to see some of the books and some of the diagrams and things. But that's the 5-minute version to give everyone a little bit of food for thought on habit stuff.
Such great tips here. I love it. And I also heard someone shared a tip at some point of, if you even just give yourself 5 minutes to start something, sometimes you're, just by forcing yourself to do a little bit will motivate you to do even more. So I really love this this concept of tiny habits, tiny pieces. So we said it, right? Like we're probably gonna fall off at some point in our building a new habit. It's just the nature of things. We're seeing now a lot of us already with our resolutions are maybe we may have drop or not where exactly where we want to be. So how, like, what happens if you fall off? Like, how can you pick back up a habit that you're trying to build?
Since it is kind of an open discussion, Céline, maybe you can go first in terms of like, this is something we've hit a wall with in terms of some of our writing communities, in terms of like habits, like people aren't showing up as much in terms of, like they're busy in all of these things and they feel bad about not showing up to, writing group sort of things. I have an answer in mind, but A, no one wants to hear me talk the whole time. And then B, like, I kind of want to learn from you also in terms of like, how do we like, use kind of that nice like community building and like gentle social pressure to like get ourselves back on track?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to speak about that. So in my Shut Up and Write groups, the ones that I host, sometimes people go missing, as we say, for a few months at a time. We don't see a close, someone who's been a regular in the group. And often when they come back, they'll say like they got distracted or something took over in their lives. But I think we always joke in my Shut Up and Write group that it's show up and write. We really should call the group Show Up and Write, because once you show up, that's, half the battle. And if it means showing up and writing just for 15 minutes, that's 15 minutes more than you would otherwise have done if you had not been, committed to coming to the writing group. So I think when you fall off, the first step, at least when it comes to writing, is to ratchet up to choose whatever that smallest action is that will get you back into your groove and build up to maybe bigger goals, more ambitious projects. But I think the showing up and then writing whatever you can is going to be the first step forward. And that I've definitely seen across the 2.5 years that I've been hosting the groups, and also participating before that in various Shut Up and Write communities. I'd be happy to talk about some of our success stories in the group, but I don't know if you want to switch back to another topic. Happy to go with the flow.
Yeah, I guess to chime in a little bit, one of the here, just to make things simpler, I'm going to share a link on the chat for anyone that wants to look at it later. But this really speaks to me. So Kelly McGonigal does a lot of research on a number of things. So like her book Upside on Stress is really good. And the reason why I'm bringing her up in this article is what she calls planning for failure, which is perfect in this case, in the context of what we're talking about. So just assume that in an ideal world, we totally like nail our habits and then do all the things, be the perfect self and like manage all of these things. This is much more realistic in terms of like, all right, have a plan in place. That totally hoax. And the plan shouldn't be like beat ourselves up or like, kind of like, get down on ourselves. Rather, it should be pragmatic in terms of like, yeah, I missed the thing. I missed a day on this. Interestingly, so there's still ongoing debate about the psychology of streaks in terms of like, can you keep up like a, 30-day streak or a 15-day streak? It's interesting. I've kind of self-experimented on myself and I kind of like it, but the other thinking is that once the streak becomes the goal in itself and not the habit, you skip it and be like, screw it. There's no point now because I missed the large number. But that kind of like puts the cart before the horse in terms of the point of the streak was to keep your habit going. So anyways, Kelly McGonigal's thing about like, the plan for failure is really important and realistic too, in terms of like, okay, can I have a next step? And I was like, I missed a day. It's actually not the end of the world to do these things. Like, how do I pick back up? Or, stuff happens in life. We're sick. We miss a week or so, or other things happen. Where can we pick up next? Like, how can we commit? Habits are a funny thing. Habits are fragile in some ways in terms of like, they become part of our routine. Some habits are very easy, like digital habits that we do, the first things that we do in the morning and at night. It might be checking news, checking social media and all of these things. But sometimes when we're building a habit, just a little bit of a nudge, something a little bit off can, throw us out of orbit a little bit. But the idea is like having a plan in place ahead of time. So like before you miss the thing or whatever it is, in terms of like, okay, so what's the plan now? What can I do tomorrow? If it's just sort of, it's like I missed the gym or I missed this sort of thing. It's like, no big deal, actually. It's like, I'm going to go back. And it doesn't need to be like, let's not go nuts here. That doesn't mean necessarily is like, I missed this. So now I need to do double the gym time and make myself like sick and throw up afterwards. That's also not productive. It just simply means picking up where you're going. And this goes, I saw in the comments, someone mentioned James Clear's Atomic Habits. Great, because that's exactly the whole thing about tiny incremental, what does he call it? Tiny gains is perfect. So like, he uses this example of like tiny habits are, if you just aim to be 1% better over the course of a year, that's amazing. That is amazing. The math is like 37% more of, something, whatever it is, just by 1% and a little bit. And then missing a couple of days isn't that big a deal. 1% isn't that big. In the aggregate, it's great, but small terms, and it was like, it's not the end of the world. Anyways, yeah, I thought I would mention that.
Yeah, I love that. We need to be realistic. We're probably going to fail in the way that we're not going to be able to sustain necessarily the plan that we have initially hoped for. And so I love this, thinking ahead about what you're going to do when you hit that wall or when you're not able to sustain. So that's really great advice. And we're, sharing in the chat all those resources and we also share in a blog afterwards. So I saw also a question about people wanting to make sure that they have all those books. So we'll make sure to share all those resources. So Céline, I'd love to go back to you and hear, a little bit more about how within your work in collaboration with your Shut Up and Write group, you've been kind of supporting those frameworks, and would love to hear about some outcome and some success that you've experienced yourself or witnessed with your group members.
Yeah, I'd love to speak about that. So in my Shut Up and Write group, as I said, I've been hosting that for 2 years, and going on at least 3 years I've been in the same group. And I've seen people like complete their PhD dissertations, write full drafts of novels, or query agents to find representation for their books. So we joke that it's like magic to be in our group, although it's not 100% magic, because you do have to do some work during this writing sessions. But becoming a regular and doing whatever task you set out for yourself, and holding yourself accountable to the group, has really benefited so many of the members who participate in my Shut Up and Write group. I can just say from my perspective, it's been like magic. I've divide my time during the Shut Up and Write sessions between creative writing and academic research. And on the creative writing side of things, I've completed a full draft of one book, partial draft of another, several essays. And on the academic side, I've written half a dozen articles, application for sabbatical, which I then spent working on other articles and research papers. So it's been hugely successful to be part of the Shut Up and Write community. And I think just seeing other people's successes feed into my sense of contributing to community, but also seeing this possibility of accomplishing other writing goals. And I think the last thing that I'll add to that is that I fall under the not so great with New Year's resolutions when it comes to other things. Like I've said, I think 2 or 3 years in a row to myself that I'm going to run a 5K. That has not happened, but the writing goals, I've kind of blown through them because I have the Shut Up and Write group to keep me on track with a regular schedule. I go to Shut Up and Write usually 5 days a week on my non-teaching days. I try to stay there the whole time, and I facilitate and speak with others to form a community. I think that's really important, to build community around these goals. And I don't have that with my ambitious and vague running goals. So the writing has really helped being part of the Shut Up and Write community.
Right, and I love how you're bringing that concept of community. I think it can really help someone build a new habit. That concept of feeling accountable, and supported with others. Can you, Nick, Tyler, just going back to you, Nick, I'm curious, like within your research around forming habit, like what has come up, like how important is community, and what has come up from the research around that?
One of the things, so it's still preliminary right now, but some of the things that we're noticing are specifically, and I really like how honest people have been in terms of just sort of like writing is lonely, like I mentioned before, in terms of just like even the presence of having someone right there next to you can be really nice, especially, I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but I still mostly work remotely. I'll go to the office 1 or 2 days a week, but it's just nice to have a little bit of that, like even that. So the other part I forgot to mention too, for the Shut Up and Write groups, meetups that we do, is like, yes, we do the writing sessions, but we also have like break times that we agree upon together. So if we need a 5-minute break, that's good. If we want to take a 20-minute break and just sort of talk and hang out a little bit, that part is really nice. So one of the things that I think we're starting to realize is that, has anyone heard of Cal Newport's book, Deep Work? That's another good one, I think. I can share it. But so focus writing is supposed to be hard, right? Like when you're actually just doing this, I mean, I call BS on people that say like, oh yeah, I write like, I'm working and writing on this thing for 12 hours a day. And I was like, really? Really? Like, so if I like look over at you right now and I don't see WhatsApp open or like, a million other social media things, I was like, that's not focused writing. So like deep work that Cal Newport is talking about, and sometimes it's okay to be distracted, but like deep work, what I'm talking about is kind of like just focusing on this and doing it in small amounts of time. That is supposed to be exhausting. Like we're tired afterwards. I mean, to give you a sense, like I think we're fairly tired when we do like 4 or 5 of these sprint sessions, these 20-30 minute ones that are focused, and we're type and doing all of these things. And then it's sort of break time. The social break time is good because our cognitive resources are going down when we do this. For most of us, assuming we like other people, we like the people that we're being around, a little bit of interaction like actually refills our energy gauge a little bit, our cognitive resource gauge. So more to be said on that, kind of like the writing and break stuff, but those are some of the things that we're finding. And then just very quickly to mention is like also being realistic too. So that's kind of why we do these sprint sessions, which may or may not work for everyone here, but knowing that we have a finite amount of attention that we can concentrate on something. Digital distraction, as we're finding, when we start getting distractions, like it's really not just the phones. It's about half the time, roughly, the distractions come from ourselves, the interruptions in terms of like, and I say this fully knowing the research and the literature behind this, but I struggle with this all the time. Middle of something, and then all of a sudden, I need to look up this random thing. I need to go to like reorganize my to-do list. I need to do one of these sorts of things. So that's about half of the struggle right there. But if we can just make mental deals with ourselves and kind of focus on, we're going to do this for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever, and then go nuts during your break, whatever it is you want to do, as long as you come back to it and don't get too far down the rabbit hole. But anyways, more to be said on that, but we really think there's something here. Céline, like you're saying with the magic, it is like, it's still, you have to show up and do the work, but it's amazing in terms of like what you can accomplish with like a group of like-minded people and just that little social boost that you get from being in a room of other people also working.
Yeah, and I think also thinking about like the connections that you form with others, like once you start showing up to, a same group and seeing the same people, it's feeling accountable to motivate them as well. Like you want to be motivated, but it's demotivating if your usual partners aren't showing up. So building that sense of accountability that goes both ways. And then being just genuinely excited to see them. If you I personally like started going to a gym, and I go the same morning, so it's the same people, and now I'm excited to go just because I want to know what Lori did actually this weekend, or how her husband is doing. And so just that building into your forming new habits, that sense of friendship, of sense of belonging, of wanting to truly authentically connect with others, can go a really long way. So really, obviously with Meetup, like there's groups for everything. So like finding that connection with others can be very powerful. So we're going to do one more questions, and then we're going to turn to questions from our attendees, because we have a ton of questions that we received. Just a question for you, Tyler, because you've mentioned a little bit about the research that you've done, that it's more focused on digital habits and social media. And obviously that's now a big part of people's life. So wanted to ask you, how do you see technology influencing our ability to form and maintain positive habits? And are there any specific digital tools or platforms that can either facilitate or hinder habit formation?
Yeah, let's see. Ooh, I mean, so this is like one of my favorite questions to ask. How much time do we have left to? Okay, I'll make it short.
Probably like three more minutes.
Okay, all right.
So you have time. Yeah.
Okay, so let me share a couple of thoughts on this right away in terms of, so we're all users and creators of like basically like a digital habit ecosystem. Like I think in one of the things that I wrote recently, I talked about the internet is essentially one giant habit machine. It is, in terms of like, cue, response, reward, repeat, repeat, repeat. That sums up a lot of what we do online. Like in terms of like how we use, and we're also like reinforcing these sort of things. we tend to engage, research shows that we tend to engage most with videos that are 10 to 15 seconds long. Thus, TikTok was born. Let's just give people just 10 to 15 seconds, now it's a minute, whatever. But you understand my point in terms of like we have a craving for shorter videos. So therefore, like these start to become more and more popular. We tend on average, for example, to unfortunately click on negative news headlines, things with, words like war, death, COVID, etc., things that kind of stress us out or make angry. Thus, social media platforms will give us boatloads of negative headlines. That's just how it works. Like we vote with our clicks when it comes to some of the things that we're exposed to. So, for those of you that have seen the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, you probably have like a little bit of a taster of that in terms of like, I don't actually, it's good. I mean, it's interesting and it's worth seeing, but I don't actually think it's just like, big tech is this like malignant force that controls everything. We have to give ourselves more credit. We have more control over these things than we think we do. Where was I going with that? So like in terms of some of the things, for example, I will use one of the apps I like is called Forest app. So you can install it on your phone. Some of you might have heard of this before, but it's a little timer and it's basically a way, set the timer for whatever you want. You plant a digital tree on your phone and then it'll start growing. But if you touch your phone to check it for any reason, the tree dies. You watch the thing, it's just a fake tree, who cares? But that little bit of a nudge is actually enough to be like, oh, okay. It's like, it can wait. I can check this in 5 more minutes or whatever it is. But that's just one example of kind of how do we disincentivize. Sorry, it's late here. Disincentivize the things that we don't want to do. So finding those sort of things. I like the Freedom app, or even on both Android devices and iOS, making use of the screen time and digital well-being limits on the things. I think that's a great one. So again, personal example, I love checking sports, baseball scores first thing in the morning, especially because it's late this time of night. So that intrinsically, I strongly desire wanting to do. There's stuff that I don't want to do. Céline, the running thing. I am trying to do a 5K. I hate running. So like my motivation is like way low on the thing, but I was like, all right, it's good for me, mental health, blah, 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 all of that. So I am trying to work on that. I understand that it's good in terms of like, okay, do my little bit of running, even if it's just 10 minutes when it's cold and dark and rainy outside. It's like, then I get to check baseball. Then I get to check the other things and all of that. So that's actually fairly rewarding. Building in the things, again, in Atomic Habits, this is called habit stacking. So is that right? Yeah, habit stacking. So that's the idea of like building new habits onto things that you already do is a great way to kind of like easily, you can start doing this tomorrow is the thing. In terms of like one of your things is you drink coffee first thing in the morning. Can you build in a little habit in terms of like I want to start doing yoga, which is also something I've tried and failed at for the past 10-ish years. But let's say, for example, it's like, okay, so I just want to like tiny versions of this. I just want to get into a little bit of stretching while I'm drinking my coffee, waiting for my thing. That's the idea of like building up in very tiny ways. Anyways, let me address your other question too, about like, I'm not anti-social media when it comes to distractions and all these habit things. One of the tools I recommend is actually not a tool at all. It's just actually a mindset in terms of a little more conscious awareness. So a simple question in terms of, so the average person, it really depends on age group and profession, but average person checks their phone between 50 and 150 times per day. A lot of checks, but like, some of it is unconscious in terms of like, we pick it up and we check it just because we've got a spare 2 minutes and all of these things. So you could try this. Anyone could try this afterwards in terms of just like stop and ask, like, what am I hoping to get out of this? Like, is there a reason I'm checking? I'm bored is a perfectly valid reason, as long as we've kind of checked in with ourselves. Is it I'm putting off, I saw procrastination come up in the questions a couple of times. I'm putting this off because I'm uncomfortable or intimidated by this thing. So let me do Instagram for 30 minutes. And I was like, okay, again, maybe not necessarily anything wrong with that, but could we do a minute of the task we're putting off and then Instagram break? Are there ways that we can kind of use a carrot and stick, not stick, carrot approach in terms of like, if I do this, then my reward is that. That's one thing I would recommend, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that idea of like the stacking of habits. I thought that was like really something smart and easy to start doing. So we have about a few more minutes. So just want to make sure that we address some of the questions coming in from our attendees. The first one will be for you, Céline. So someone asked, the Shut Up and Write group sounds good for someone who's a writer, but basically that person's asking if you are not a writer and just wants to get, some inner thoughts out on paper. Does it make sense to join a Shut Up and Write group?
Yeah, I think it does make sense. We have many writers of different types in our group. Some people come to journal, some people also work on tasks that are related to their writing. So at least my group is very welcoming and flexible with what counts as writing during our sessions. It's more the sense that you're committing to a task that's, you're leveraging the accountability of the group, and less so whether you're writing a synopsis or part of a novel or a research paper, or simply journaling about something that's on your mind. So we try to be very open-minded in my group about parameters of Shut Up and Write. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say to that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, and thinking about writing, I feel we write so much in our life. So definitely just kind of like more focused type of work. I think that the setup, that the simple methodology that Shut Up and Write has can be beneficial. So here's another question, maybe for you as well, Céline. Short and specific writing goals for write-in. I don't know how to break it down further. Like, write an outline is as big as work on a novel. How do you break it down further?
That's a really tough question because I think people have different styles in terms of breaking down things. I like to just jump into a draft and see what comes, and then kind of resort what I've written into something coherent. But there are other people on the other end of the spectrum who love outlining and breaking things down into smaller and smaller segments. So to someone who's not sure what camp they belong in, at least for the moment, I would say to give each a shot. If you feel that you're someone who, when you're trying to write, flows more naturally to not try to segment things yet, then go for that. But if on the other hand, you can't start writing without, having a good sense of where you're going, that's also a kind of disposition that you should keep in mind. So I think that writers come in have all sorts of mindsets. So I think it's a matter of experimentation to figure out the kind of writer that you are and what small goals are the best for you to start with.
Yeah, I love that. Trying different strategies and see how productive you can be in those specific times that you allocate on that. I have one that I think was very interesting about someone saying that they're tempted to use Gen AI to help them write. How do you feel about using tools like ChatGPT, for example, to write?
Should I take it, Tyler, or do you want to?
Yeah.
I think it's completely dependent on the context that you're writing in. As an academic, we have, I'm teaching, and so we have guidelines and expectations in terms of the use of generative AI for like essays in philosophy. Philosophy is my field, but generative AI can be also very productive in other ways. So I don't think there's like a hard and fast rule about the ways in which you can use generative AI. I've used it to generate ideas about different topics. So yeah, I think that generative AI can be a companion, but I'm also wary about it not replacing the full creativity and intellectual contributions that we can make as humans.
Yeah, I love that. Companion as as you write. I think that sounds like a good suggestion in how to leverage those type of tools. I'm gonna ask a question here. and from Arnab, who's asking how to form habits for people with ADHD. So I imagine also ADHD or maybe some learning disabilities.
So that's a harder one. That is a good question. I'm glad you asked. That is something within our ThinkLab here at Cambridge. We have a whole strand of work with BBC and Google and a few other partner organizations on neurodiversity and work habits, workplace things. And there is no like, we're still learning about this in terms of like what works for some people, like, and it's such a range, right? In terms of the different things that we're talking about. What are your particular struggles with ADHD? Some people have a little bit of the, it's like it's the million different things at once, or sometimes it's the super focus thing in terms of like when I get really into it, sometimes I lose, it's a little bit of a flow thing. It's a little bit of a like I lose track of time when I'm working on some of these things. I don't know how to answer that question right now in terms of specifically for ADHD stuff, other than to say it's kind of, you have to approach these things with a spirit of experimentation. I think in terms of being able to see like, what does and doesn't work. So with my students, I talk about, we're all kind of self-scientists, for example, in terms of like really trying to understand what are our weaknesses? What are the things that we're most likely going to be prone to be more distracted, or knowing where our energy is like, kind of like getting a drain from, and what are the things that both bring us up and, drain us down for some of that. That's a partial answer at best in terms of some of these things, but finding your flow, like the things that work well for you, and finding out when are the times when I'm best positioned to succeed. Chronotype is one of the things. So chronotype is basically a fancy way of saying, are you a morning person or a nighttime person? It's like I do my best thinking at night, or like first thing in the morning is great, like making sure you maximize most of that stuff. So most certainly that's not the time for kind of rote, email, news stuff. Safeguarding that time to get the best out of the hours that you have in the day is one generally good place to start.
Awesome. Yeah, that I really love that approach of self-experimenting and finding what works or not for you. We're already at time. It was such a great discussion. Thank you both to Céline and Tyner for today's discussion. It was really, really great to hear about valuable frameworks to apply in our daily life and to help us better reach our goals. Thank you all for joining us. Really glad to see so many of you who attended and actually made time to get tools to learn new habits. So as a reminder, we will be sending you a link with a recording of the event, or you can also access it on our YouTube channel in the following days. So yeah, once again, thank you everyone, and I hope everyone feels motivated to crush their goals.
Thank you.